Welcome to today's talk about litigating during COVID. My name is Regina DeMeo, and I'm a family law attorney in Maryland and DC. And with me today is Evan Schein. He's a top family law litigator in New York City, my hometown. Thanks so much for being here, Evan.
Regina, thank you for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. So, you and I kind of know what's going on behind the scenes, but I think a lot of people are unaware of how a trial would normally work and then what it's like during COVID. So if you could start by just explaining what a typical time frame would be up in New York City for a case.
Regina, it's a fantastic question. And I want to start by saying, I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I had a crystal ball that could accurately tell me the answer to this question. But with litigation, there's so many unknowns. The process, the timeframes for each stage, valuations, appraisals, discovery, deposition, these are things that take time. And perhaps most importantly, when a case is in litigation, there's so many people involved. There's the clients, there's the attorneys, if there's an attorney for the child, the judge's law secretary. So when it comes to calendaring and scheduling, that's a whole nother layer. But when a client says to me, Evan, from start to finish, what's the time frame? I generally like to err on the side of being conservative. So I will say 18 months to 24 months. And look, I've had cases from start to finish that have been less than 18 months. And I've had cases that have dragged on for 3 years or 4 years. But generally, I give the time frame 18 to 24 months. If it settles or gets resolved before, great. But the important thing as an attorney, if you have a sense that a case is going to go on longer than your expected time frame, I think it's incredibly important to communicate with your client to manage expectations.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's pretty much the same here. And then in terms of the process itself, could you just describe briefly, like what is the process?
I would say litigation is like a puzzle. It's often said that the first move and the first piece you put in the puzzle and the last move and the last piece are the two most important. But the truth is, and as I mentioned, so much of it is really what happens in between, whether it's court conferences, depositions, discovery. And discovery is the exchange of financial information, bank records, credit card statements, depositions, the taking, testimony under oath, asking someone questions to get information that perhaps someone was not, forthcoming and transparent about. When each of those steps, and really incredibly important steps, whether it's moving forward with a trial or to settle the case, are completed, you get another step closer to really completing the puzzle. Mm-hmm. There's court appearances along the way, but I want to mention that even though a case may be in litigation, there's always two paths. There's the litigation path and there's the settlement path. And just because your case is in a litigation and is being litigated and you're in front of a judge, that doesn't mean that your attorney is not settling the case or not actively trying to settle the case. And although a case may be in court, there's usually an opportunity to settle after some of those things I mentioned are complete. Depositions, exchanging records, and court appearances.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same here. And I thankfully, I think the statistic is that 90% of cases will settle, right?
They do, and it's similar here in New York. To me, sometimes court's necessary. If you have a case that's been lingering, if you have a case where you're requesting documentation outside of the court process and things are moving slowly, someone is not compliant and really producing information that would allow you to have the necessary information to settle a case. Sometimes court is necessary. And it's amazing to me how many cases settle after that first court appearance in front of the judge or the second court appearance in front of the judge.
Yeah, definitely. So in light of COVID, I was wondering how you find the time frame has been impacted, because it's definitely been impacted down here.
No, it's a great question, and Regina, I'm fascinated to hear your experience in DC and Maryland. But in New York, when COVID first hit in New York City, like so many areas of the country, from a court perspective, and as a divorce attorney, it was the Wild West. Things shut down. There was uncertainty. Things were chaotic for everyone. And really the second half of March, April, and even into May, no new divorce actions in New York could be filed until around Memorial Day. And if your case was in court, things were put on hold. Things were being administratively adjourned. There was no one to reach out to. And if you were lucky enough to get a judge or a law clerk on the phone or responding to your emails, sometimes they didn't have the answers because no one knew if and when things would return from a court perspective. But now everyone's trying to figure things out. And I think the court system has made tremendous, progress, in New York City. Virtual appearances are happening. There are still no in-person court appearances, no in-person trials. We're living in a virtual world. And I think, look, we're all trying to figure it out. The court staff, the court personnel, the administrative judges, New York State has done an incredible job. New York has shifted from Skype for Business for court appearances to Microsoft Teams, but we are in a far better situation now. And as we head into 2021 and turn the page on, a very long 2020, we're in a much better situation now than we were in March, April, May, when the pandemic first hit.
But there's definitely a backlog, right? I mean, all those cases that weren't moving are now being, reset.
There is a backlog, and it was, things are getting a little better. Things are starting to clear up, but the court right now is still dealing with cases from March and April. I mean, the truth is I had a handful of cases that were on the verge of settling in March, and COVID hit, and those cases couldn't settle because there were financial implications. I had cases that, were on for the first time in front of a judge, middle of March, early April. Those cases are just being heard now in some respects. So there is a backlog, there is a delay. I think as we head into 2021, there is a big push by the court system to really move those cases forward. In the system, courts are starting to suggest court-ordered mediation to assist and help with the backlog. But look, anytime you go through something that, people in New York, people in DC, people all over the country went through, there's an inevitable backlog.
So do you think that this is incentivizing people to settle through mediation more?
It's a great question. I think when COVID first hit, I had clients of mine who said, Evan, I can't take another year of this. I don't know when, my case is going to be heard. My case has been in the court system for a year and a half, 2 years, without a date set, with no certainty as to when the case would even be heard, let alone when the case would be concluded. Sure, people looked, and I think it was natural, for a different way to settle their case. I had clients who mediation, ADR, collaborative law, those would never have been the process choices for them. They looked for any opportunity to settle their case, right? Now, I think, look, the court system is moving forward. People are able to file new actions. Court appearances are taking place virtually. So I still think that people who, I think with the court system moving forward, all process choices are available to people. But sure, at the beginning of COVID, people looked for other ways to settle their cases. Now I think people are looking for what's the best process choice and fit for them.
So with the changes, do you think it's streamlined the process for you in litigation and being able to just appear by Zoom, not having to go to the actual courthouse? Or do you think are there glitches? Are there things that have become more complicated?
I love litigating. I spend more time litigating in a courtroom than I do my own living room, and except for this year in 2020. So for me, and someone who spends so much time in a courtroom, there are certain things that being in a courtroom provide. And I think one of the things that's missing in the virtual world, judges and their court personnel and their law clerks and their law secretaries would spend so much time with the attorneys and the clients really trying to settle the cases. I also think there's something to be said for litigants and clients being in a courtroom, experiencing that, because I do think it incentivizes people to settle a case. And if you hear another case, or if you see the judge or see what's happening on another case, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what, I really should settle my case. But we're living in a virtual world. And so I think there's benefits to it. I think, technology is a wonderful thing, and I think everyone's adapting. I think the virtual appearances are here to stay, and I think it's great. I absolutely love it. I think it's efficient. I think it's great for clients from a cost standpoint. Not every situation should require you to spend hours upon hours in a courtroom, right? There's certain things that I know in my practice, whether it's a quick compliance conference on discovery or giving the court a status update, you can hop on a Microsoft Teams call, a phone conference, and do that in 15 minutes. So I think it's efficient, and I think it's here to stay. I think that's a great thing.
I agree, but there's so many cases. I don't know if you guys have this. We have what's called a TBA docket. So basically, it's a situation where the court is overbooked. They have too many trials, and someone gets bumped. So they're TBA waiting for a judge, and so many negotiations would actually happen while we were waiting for that to happen. And obviously, that's not happening now.
No, and I'm laughing because I saw it all the time in the past. I'm seeing it now. People want to move forward. I think there's a lot of self-reflection that's happening during COVID. I think the pandemic is causing and forcing people to reevaluate certain things, priorities, and I think people want to move forward, and that includes getting their divorce that has probably been lingering in the court system, getting that done.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. If people wanted to contact you for further information, could you share that with us?
Sure, I'm happy to. People could follow me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram. People could go to my firm's website, www.berkbot.com. That's BERKBOT.com. I also just started a brand new podcast, the Shine On Podcast, which I'm incredibly excited for that as well. And people could subscribe and follow me there.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that podcast. You have some great guests lined up.
Thank you, Regina. I appreciate it. It's something new, and we're incredibly excited about that.
That's fantastic. Well, Evan, thanks so much for all this information today.
Regina, thank you. It was a pleasure being with you.
Absolutely. Well, stay safe and stay tuned for next time.